Everybody for being here. I really appreciate you coming to our first AgTech event in Nevada County. Of course, I want to thank the presenters and panelists for being here, taking time out of their busy schedules. I just want to do a quick introduction to NC Tech Connection. NC Tech Connection is an initiative of the Economic Resource Council and supported by Northern Rural Employment and Training Council, and we start a consortium, and we started this initiative 1.5 years ago. And our purpose is to showcase, support, and uplift the tech community in this region. And we're very conscious that technology today threads through every industry by providing services, support, and solutions. So this year, we're focusing more on cross-sector partnerships and working with different industries. So our attempt with the AgTech is to start with agriculture. We hope to continue this conversation throughout the year and also have another event next year which will be more tailored to the needs and wants of this area. So we do have evaluation forms here. It's outside the Tahoe conference room, and I would really appreciate if everybody fills out those forms before they leave today. You also have a chance, if you fill out the form, to win an Amazon Echo Dot. So there's a little incentive there for you to do that. Again, talking a little bit about NC Tech Connection, it's an initiative, it's a movement. So it's run by, organized by a lot of volunteers, business partners, and professionals in the area. And I really, if you go to our page and read about us, you'll see the businesses that are involved and the individuals that are involved to make all our initiatives happen. And I have to, as an example, I work with Autometrics, and they gave me the day off today to be able to do this for you. So we appreciate the involvement of everybody. I do have to thank our sponsors. We have NID, which is Nevada Irrigation District. Briar Patch provided a lot of our food here today. I have to thank Royce AgTech Innovation Network. They're pros at doing this. They do this all over the country, and they've helped guide us and also bring us 3 of our 4 speakers today. I'm going to have few housekeeping items to announce. Food and drinks, they're okay to bring in here. Just make sure what you bring in, you take out and don't spill anything. We have all the volunteers who have helped with this event have a badge that says AgTech, so see who they are and chat with them if you get a chance. I talked about the evaluation forms. If you go on social media, if you take any pictures, you can use the hashtag AgTech18. That would be really cool. We have Q&A available after every presenter as well as after the panel discussion. So wait for your questions till the end. And because we're recording this for clarity of voice purposes, we'll be using a microphone. So hold your answers till the mic comes to you. And then cell phones, he's already talked about. So we have 2 of our co-chairs of the community development team here today who I would like them to introduce our speakers today. So I'm going to let James step up and kick it off. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shivati. And a huge thank you to Shivati and the rest of the team that helped pull all of this together. It was an idea about 6 months in the making. We were looking for ways to bring the 2 most important economic drivers in the county together in an event. Agriculture and technology are 2 absolute key economic drivers in Nevada County, and this just seemed a logical connection, and tying it with the Sierra Harvest Food Farm Conference, which is happening tomorrow and Sunday, seemed a very logical thing to do, and I'm so pleased with the response we've gotten from the community, both locally and in California. With the speakers, the fine speakers that have come in to share their point of view with this group, and hopefully this can just be the first of many events like this as we drive forward in improving this. Our first speaker is Gabe Yahtzee. Get that right? Close enough. He's with the University of California, and he and his team are focused on catalyzing the intersection between agriculture and technology. Many people who are thinking about these things see that agriculture and technology are two sectors, not just here in the county or here in the state, but globally, that it's vital that they start working together to bring efficiency to the food production process, efficiency to what do we do with water, efficiency in so many ways that technology can positively impact our lives. So I'd like to introduce Gabe, who's going to be our keynote speaker, and he'll be sharing some of his points of view on how this can make sense for all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you for having me today. I absolutely love Nevada County and coming to Nevada City. So any chance I can be in this region, I love it. I'm from Southern Oregon, from a very similar small town. So very much love it. And I recognize this picture doesn't exactly look like Nevada City, but I was in El Centro yesterday. It looks more like that. But off to the right, we're starting to look more like Nevada City. So thank you again, Gabe Yahtzee. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at the University of California, Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. I'm going to say a little bit about more about who that is in just a sec and what we do. And I'll say that I'm a business and tech guy, but now I'm an ag guy too. And prior to coming to UC Ag and Natural Resources, where I've been learning more than I ever thought I needed to know about agriculture. I worked at UC Davis, and prior to that, I worked in industry. And so I've now kind of my career has also brought this ag and tech sector together, and I'm excited to tell you more about what we're doing and how Nevada County can participate. So first of all, let me start off with a little bit about California agriculture, and I'm going to give credit to Robert C. because this is his slide, and forgetting that he was going to also talk here. I wonder if you have this slide in your presentation too. Perfect. So, but this is brilliant because it's always good to start with what's the scope and scale of California agriculture, and the farm gate value, the raw value of our agriculture is at $50 billion. That's the highest ag producing state in the nation. So California is the highest. People don't often recognize that most of their fruits, vegetables, and nuts come from California, but a third of the vegetables, 2/3 of the fruits and nuts do. We're the top dairy producing state. Right behind that, almonds, grapes, cattle, strawberries, and a variety of vegetables and nuts. We're 13% of the U.S. total. Our exports are also a very significant economic component as well, representing over $21 billion. A variety of specialty crops, as we call them. And we've got over 400 of these in California. Most have 2 or 3 in their state. California has over 400 specialty crops. So the diversity, the scale, and the scope of California agriculture makes it very unique, really across the world. In our region, the agriculture and food industry is about $3 billion annually. So Nevada County, I didn't tease that out, but that's included in here, and employs over 37,000 workers. We've got 1.5 million acres of farmland currently. We've got farms and ranches of all sizes, from the very, very largest to very, very, very small. Over 150 crops right here in this region, and over 3 million tons of food are produced each year. So for those of you who I always like to flash this picture, how do we compare with the rest of the world? Because it actually gets at ag tech and who can help us and be allies in this. So as you can see here, we've got Southern Europe, we've got the Middle East, we've got Northern Africa, Chile, South Africa, and Australia. Very, very similar to California's Mediterranean climate. And so those regions are particularly good partners for us as we proceed in this agriculture technology. But don't forget the Netherlands. Netherlands is not like California. It's probably more like Washington State. But Netherlands is an amazing place. It's a tenth of the size of California. And yet the Netherlands is one of the most innovative agricultural technology and agricultural production regions in the world. I don't know if either of you have the statistics about like their position on like tomato. They're like the #2 tomato producer in the world. They're leading the charge on things like vertical farming and controlled environment agriculture, growing food indoors. And necessity has been the mother of invention in there. They have, too much water, unlike us, and too little land. We have kind of the opposite problem here. So I wanted to call out Netherlands also as an area of innovation and a potential partner for California. And they actually have a landing spot here in California because California innovation and its know-how in agriculture is second to none. So their embassy at people, and they bring people here all the time. So maybe we'll have them come visit you guys too. So let me just say a little bit about UC Agriculture and Natural Resources, also UC A&R. There's three different things that we do. First of all is cooperative extension. And that is a function that's been around for over 100 years. It was really a visionary foresight through the establishment of the land-grant universities by President Lincoln, actually, back in the 1800s, and then the establishment of cooperative extension, which was really meant to bring the latest advances in research out to the communities. And so in every single county, we've got almost in California, we have a cooperative extension office, including Placer in Nevada County. Do we have our local representative here? Is that Dan? Welcome. So they often will come to the events like this, so I'm delighted that they're here as well. And they're a resource for you to link back to the rest of the University of California. We've got campus-based specialists at UC Berkeley, UC Davis, UC Riverside. And so you have resources that will link back to world-class research and innovation back to these topics. In fact, I was just talking to one gentleman here about talking about working together on testing some new technologies. We have run a variety of functions: 4-H, master gardeners, master naturalists, master food preservers, in addition to our cooperative extension function. We also have research centers, and this is a key area I see going forward around California. Complementary to our campuses, we've got these research and extension centers where we are in the field testing, evaluating, and doing things like field days to really showcase and do research in every climate, microbiome, whatever you want to call it, of California. The closest one here is in Browns Valley, not too far away from here, our Sierra Foothills Research and Extension Center. So I already mentioned some of the programs that we have. We run youth development through 4-H. I've listed all of those. And we have nutrition, water, informatics, and GIS, which is what we're working on with the ag tech movement. So we really see ourselves as a network. And so we are deeply committed to and care about our rural communities in California. And so as much as we can, we're out and about in the thick of things. So we're happy to be here today. So the reason that my job exists is because there's a realization that a new approach needs to be taken to bring innovation and entrepreneurship to agriculture. It's not the only thing, but it's a key driver of what we're doing. And there are threats to California that, as I've heard our Secretary of Agriculture say, literally threaten the leadership of California agriculture in the world because of less labor. Labor is a very difficult issue for our farms to find, especially for very labor-intensive organic or crops like strawberries, as you see being picked here. So labor is a very critical issue. Land, increasingly, we're not understanding our land trade-offs very well. And so agricultural land is being lost to great uses, but we're losing our ability to produce food. Water scarcity is nothing new to California, and it was abated for a while last year, but it's coming back. And so that will always be an issue for us. Changing climate, pest threats of all different kinds, including the Asian citrus psyllid, which has literally killed off much of the Florida citrus industry and is now coming to California. Our soil health, which contributes to the sustainability of our agriculture, and food safety, which is an ever-present issue and threat to production agriculture. So we have major challenges, and technology is well positioned if we can create it correctly and create it thoughtfully to help us meet some of those challenges. So let's talk about some of the technologies when I talk about agriculture technology, because there's a lot of definitions of this, and I definitely don't even do it justice with this list. But let's start with some of these things. Internet of Things for the farm. So I don't know, how many of you have an Alexa, an Echo? Okay, I have 3, much to my wife's chagrin at home. Those devices that are connected, or a Fitbit, those devices on farm, measure things like water, individual plant health. I was talking to a scientist yesterday who is trying to create a nanosensor, so every single plant has a nanosensor on it that would feed information back about its individual health, which would be amazing. It has to get small enough and cheap enough to be able to do that. So monitoring everything to figure out the total picture to really minimize the inputs, maximize the outputs, and ensure both quality and yield of the crop and sustainability of the environment. So sensors everywhere. So drones are a form of sensor. There's sensors on tractors now. And these things have been around for a long time, but they're getting smaller, they're getting cheaper, they're getting more available. And so more and more things are being able to be monitored. We're collecting all this data. We do have to talk about what we're going to do with all this data. So managing all this data, that actually might be the single biggest challenge. We're able now to monitor many things. In fact, we're able to monitor far more things than we'll be able to make sense of it all. And so pulling all this data into some repository where it can all live, sometimes we call it a data lake, and it kind of all this, these subspecies of data live together, and then someone needs to try to make sense of it and then turn it into something very usable and simple for our farmers and our food producers. We're at the point now in this ag tech space where we've got a lot of charts and graphs, we've got a lot of data spitting out, but how much decision making can a farmer actually make on that? Still got a ways to go. I include the genomics, and there's a new technology called CRISPR-Cas9, which is a way to rapidly edit genes, which is not considered GMOs, by the way, in the U.S. It is considered GMOs in Europe. So there's a lot of work to do still on figuring all of that out, but it is an important technology and discovery. It actually came out of UC Berkeley, but it now has kind of attention and research happening the world over because of its potential to much more rapidly breed plants and characteristics such as drought tolerance and resistance to stress. Talking about labor issues, robotics, and mechatronics. Mechatronics means mechanical device and electronic device together. It's a form of a robot. Very important aspects for, as we talk about labor and reducing the amount of labor. Robots have a lot of interest, but there's some problems that are still impossible to solve. You cannot pick a strawberry that's perfectly sweet and red and ripe without squishing it with a robot just yet. They're working on it really hard. And so in addition to just simply inventing the robots, thinking about what is the human component of that? How am I, either helping the human and making their job easier? And so that actually is probably going to be the intermediate step. I don't have a good picture of it today, but that'll be the human-assisted robots are going to be the start before we fully automate the farm. Plant biotechnology, so microbials, using genetics to analyze soil health and recommend soil remediation. Those technologies are coming. I always include, though, a very, very important component that I even heard before the talk was a key issue here, as it is in every rural community in California and around the U.S., is rural connectivity or rural broadband. And as I'm sure my colleagues will talk about, we're going to have ag paperweights, not ag tech, if we can't actually connect the stuff. And so we have to solve and provide cheaper, better, more reliable solutions with better speed and rural connectivity. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing to make that happen. Food science, the future of food, and a lot of interest in alternative proteins and different food products, specifically ones that are beneficial to health. The big food companies even are looking at ways, they know that our Snickers bars and Cheetos, we all love them, but we're slowly waking up to realize they're not as healthy. So meat alternatives, snack food alternatives, a lot of interest in developing those that are sustainable and healthful. And you can't talk about all this technology about energy, because water is energy, electricity is energy, and these technologies should have the beneficial aspect of saving energy as well. Some of the technology, this is happening on a global scale. Israel is a leader in particularly water technologies and reducing water. I mean, Israel is a very arid nation, I'd say at least as much, or if not more, than California. And so water technologies, they're leading the world in some ways on those technologies, and we want to increasingly learn from what they're doing. Netherlands, as I mentioned before, has growing lettuce and growing greens in indoor environments down. Spain, this is, there's your strawberry picker. I guarantee that's not in a real field, but our robotics techniques, both for things like strawberries and things like other tree fruits. Tree fruits are very difficult to pick with a robotic machine. There's UC Davis scientists have worked on that for years, but it's been very difficult to make those work reliably, to detect where the fruit is, go get the fruit, get it out, and make sure it's unblemished and perfectly picked. You wouldn't believe it, but actually picking an apple is actually a pretty hard thing to do, to get that stem just perfect. So yet, ag tech space is exploding. Silicon Valley companies, and this is even a little dated now, are coming to every sector of the farm. We've got farm management. I know you can't see that. The idea wasn't to read all that, but just to see that there's a whole lot of stuff going on. A lot of this is coming out of the Bay Area here in California, but also they're coming out of other parts of California as well, from very rural communities, and also across the nation as well, where there is where the food grows too. So fast and furious agricultural technologies are coming, and investors are getting excited in this whole space, which is a great thing. But it also presents challenges for our farmers, for our scientists, because I think that one of the things that agricultural technologists who've come from other sectors into agriculture without a background understand is growing food is hard science. And it takes a lot of know-how to grow food. And there's a lot of so many more complex variables to growing food than most other sectors, that it's really been a challenge for some of these tech companies to really figure out and to demonstrate that the product works. But they're here, they're exploding, and our job is to help make those connections, to make them successful and make our community successful. I already talked a little bit about the different technologies, so I'm going to skip this part. I'm going to mention one piece of technology I didn't mention, and that I think there is a set of food system technologies, and I'll just say new processing techniques, particularly for small farms. One of the things that we do in Cooperative Extension is we're actually studying new markets for, I'll give you a couple of examples. One is down in the Central Valley, one of our farm advisors is helping figure out how to grow moringa, which is an emerging superfood. But you got to turn it into a powder in a form that consumers want. So they're starting with the end product and figuring out how to process it and working back to a group of, in this case, Filipino farmers who want to grow it and market it. But oftentimes the processing facilities for small farmers don't really exist, so they can actually take advantage of the ability to create these products. Another example right here in Yolo County is we grow a lot of wheat as alternative cover crops. Well, if we had a barley market here, we could roast barley and sell it to brewers in the region. We don't have a custom barley roasting facility. And so those are what I would call food system innovation challenges that we're also adding, I would add to my ag tech play as well, because it'd be a very innovative way to think about new markets, because, frankly, almost anything grows in California if it has the right conditions and water. So I already talked a little bit about Internet of the Farm, so I won't spend too much time on this, but really the ultimate goal of all of these Internet of Things technologies is decisions, and not replacing the farmer, but making the farmer better informed about his or her land, and creating better decision making so they can manage the farm and minimize the amount of water, fertilizer, chemicals to create the maximum amount of yield at the highest quality. I mentioned controlled environment agriculture, but it's something that California is really well positioned to be a leader in. There's now Silicon Valley companies that are creating vertical farms. There's one called Plenty that just got millions and millions and millions of funding as a Silicon Valley based startup. Again, there's actually very few crops that will work for at-scale production still. I mean, you see leafy greens in these places. But part of the goal would be to figure out how to grow more things in controlled environments. And in California, we have the ability to both create that technology and the know-how so we can actually export that to grow this food locally around the world. Aquaculture is another piece as well that we'd call controlled environment. Gosh, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but this food systems, land use planning. And so this I mentioned this previously, and one of the innovations to come out of this area is a tool called RUX. And we think it's very, very important because it is a data-driven way to really understand the value of land use and the trade-offs that you make when you use land for different purposes. And so we've partnered and we're working on a program to create this into a software that regions can actually use to better understand the impact of those decisions and figure out the trade-off between, say, growing 1,000 acres of blueberries versus putting 1,000 homes on that same land. Food waste innovation remains a critical area that we care deeply about, and one of the partnerships that we've created is with a group called Crop Mobster. And Crop Mobster is an online marketplace that is meant to connect communities, particularly food system related. You can think of it like a Craigslist for the food system. So farmers can sell or get rid of excess produce, but really the first aim was to reduce food waste, but it also is an economic development driver, and that's going to be rolling out to California this year as well. So just to give you some of those examples. Some of the challenges, I've already mentioned some of them for ag innovation that as you're creating your agricultural technology environment, I want you to be aware of. there's a lot of these, as I show, there's a lot of these startups, and they're all trying to find their way and offer a valuable service to their communities, and they're often figuring out what to charge. On the receiving end, the farmers, they see 10 technologies that might interest them and 10 monthly subscription fees. It's too much for anybody. And figuring out how they all work together is very difficult. So one of the things that we're interested in doing is helping drive that integration of these different tools and technologies so they work together. There's less confusion. There's less cost. There's a lot of heavy marketing. Some of the science is dubious in some of these technology companies. And one of the things that we do in Cooperative Extension is we do a scientific process called field trials that really helps determine if these technologies actually work. So we're trying to make those connections and build those bridges between our Silicon Valley and our food valleys to help ensure the science backs these things up. Cultures are very different between our rural communities, our farming communities, our universities, and Silicon Valley. They need each other. Our cultures are different. What we're trying to do is bridge them. Capital to get these businesses started. Food-based businesses and agriculture have a different life cycle than a lot of the software and tech companies. So venture capital doesn't usually work for farm and food system related technologies. So the term we're using, patient capital, figuring out a better model for agriculture, something we're passionate about, and there's many who are convening around this topic to find better resources, patient capital to get ag and ag tech-based businesses started up. Our support models, often sometimes called incubators or accelerators, they're not well designed for agriculture yet. And so we're working together to build an innovation ecosystem that really takes advantage of the world-class agriculture, technology, spirit of innovation here in California and pulling it all together in an approach we call the Vine. So as I mentioned, really a key driver of this ag innovation ecosystem are pulling together uncommon bedfellows, agriculture, food, and environmental sciences with computer science and engineering, particularly data science as well, and framing that in what we call an open innovation structure, which basically means we collaborate, we share, we learn from each other, is a simple way to describe open innovation. It means I don't work in a closed system. I work in an open system, and we keep the things that are unique to us, but we share and we adapt others' technologies. And that open innovation model, many of us are excited about. With a better way to commercialize these technologies. We have that struggle in the university, figuring out how to take these amazing world-class research projects and turn that into commercial products in the marketplace quickly. And also to help our entrepreneurs in rural communities like this community and figuring out how to make connections across the state where they can build, grow, and thrive, whether they want to stay right here or they want to go over to San Francisco, either way. And so we just were awarded between our colleagues AgStart here and UC-A&R a $500,000 grant from the Economic Development Administration to help cultivate the vine. And so one of the key tenets of and it's the short for the Verde Innovation Network for Entrepreneurship, by the way, the Vine for short. One of the most important tenets of the Vine is including our rural communities. And so that is particularly why I'm thrilled to be here, because it's events like these and happening all over the state that are really going to really change the culture and get us working together, communicating, collaborating toward our common future. So we've already built up an initial community. There's community colleges represented here. There's California State Universities. UCs are represented here. The federal government, NASA's involved. Who knew? NASA are ag experts, because guess what? When we go to Mars, they have to figure out how to feed those astronauts for 5 years. We've got our big growers, Western Growers Association. I wanted to highlight the importance of our community colleges, because coming from the UC, I can talk a lot about innovating and research and building the future of this technology, and funneling our amazingly brilliant graduate students into becoming entrepreneurs. But our community colleges hold the key to the workforce around the state. And they're going to have to be the operators, and in some cases, the inventors of this technology in the future. And they're going to need that interdisciplinary skill set just as much as our four-year college graduates to be able to know and understand and operate this equipment as we proceed. So that'll be there. I wanted to call them out. West Hills College down in the Central Valley and Hartnell College in the Salinas are two that we're working closely with, but we're really excited about working across the California State Community College system, because they're also spread out across the footprint of California. I already mentioned indoor agriculture, so I'll move from there.
Can I get that one slide just one second? Thanks.
You got it. One thing I'll say, since I'm coming back here, is we're thinking about, as we proceed with the Vine, in addition to building a network and get us working together, to really think about innovation clusters. That's a fairly jargony technical term, but really it means creating a center of excellence, or centers of excellence in the case of California, where we can come together as universities, as colleges, as entrepreneurs, as corporations, as citizens, to work together to solve problems that are bigger than any of us. And the problems and opportunities in agriculture and technology are bigger than any of us. And so things like indoor agriculture and sustainably growing food that you can export to the world is going to take many of us working together across a whole number of disciplines. Growing food indoors is going to be about systems thinking and pulling it all together. So I actually would want an architect in there to say, you know what? Think about this completely differently. Think about the design of what you're doing. So we need uncommon collaborators to work together here. Robotics is another, so one success story I'll highlight. You may have heard of this company, Blue River. It well emphasizes what I'm talking about here. Started in 2011 by two Stanford alumni, smart guys, didn't know anything about farming. So in 2012, even before this, they raised a little bit of money, and they actually went out to the Central Valley and started talking to people, saying, what, we got some ideas. What can we build? There, we're engineers. We've got business acumen. What can we build? So they decided to start with a weeding and lettuce thinning machine in the central. Uses cameras to send micro precision sprays of targeted pesticides. So you don't have to blanket the field. You can send a micro-targeted spray using this array of cameras to pinpoint exactly where the weeds were. So in 2012, they raised some $3 million. They went back in 2014 and 2015 and raised more money. The National Science Foundation funded some of their work. They worked with us on our Kearney Ag Research and Extension Center in the Central Valley. They worked with ARPA-E, the federal government, talk about uncommon bedfellows, and they created a product that really became a groundbreaking robotics game-changing for the industry. So the lettuce industry in particular is using this as a weeding tool. So the result, they sold to John Deere for $305 million. So there are great examples of these ag tech companies that are doing really well. So I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to wrap up. Rural connectivity, it remains one of our biggest barriers to adoption of this technology. We feel it ourselves. In our Browns Valley location, we had to shoot signal 26 miles across from the Sutter Buttes over to our facility to get high-speed connectivity. And now we're connecting up our facility, but it was through great pain and effort to make that happen. for many of our offices, I've got to talk to my colleague back there, but Starbucks is a faster connection than their office. Yeah, so we've got work to do even in our own places still. We're working on a project, like literally this project, this picture on the right, I got this off the internet, but we're actually going to be able to do this at our Kearney facility. We're creating Wi-Fi across 330 acres at 250 megabits, which is very, very fast, to really create foundational centers to test and integrate this technology for the future, and hopefully create models for partnership where we can actually work as public-private partners to launch sites, as others are thinking about doing, to provide community-based internet from public locations. So I'll leave you with a parting summary here. Uncommon collaboration, that's going to be what's key to our transformative innovation. I've talked about a lot of our collaborators. Bringing our Silicon Valley and food valleys is key to innovation in food and ag. We must include our rural communities. I didn't get a chance to talk much about it, but growing our pipeline of innovators and operators, our youth, our students from the very youngest ages. 4-H is near and dear to us, so kids as young as grade school, getting them involved and understanding where their food comes from, and that intersection of technology is really important to us. And building the statewide ecosystem that amplifies and connects our innovation hubs. That's what's needed, and that's what we're interested in building. So with that, I'll conclude and give you a few minutes to ask some questions.
All right, thank you. Okay, great. So thank you, Gabe. So we do have a few minutes for some short questions. Anyone?
Yeah. Who do you know that's using IoT right now for agriculture to coordinate everything?
There's many different farmers using IoT in different ways, and there are a lot of water sensors being used. There's drones are being tried. They're like the lettuce machine thinning machines are definitely some of them, but as simple as things as weather towers that are connected and automated, those are in wide use. I would say that most of the industries are using sensors of various kinds, although they're not without their problems, limitations. They're expensive, they're fidgety. They take a lot of know-how to stitch together. And so I'd say oftentimes I see our bigger ag producers that have their own tech teams often using them, and then our enterprising crop consultants and pest control advisors who are advising our ag communities are using them. So they are in use, they're in growing use, but they're not in ubiquitous use across industry yet.
Yeah, I just worked with a group that made a sensor that went 4 feet into the ground, and they had to read every one, they had to dig every one.
Yeah.
And I worked with them to get a better idea for that, so that they can actually drop it out of a plane, use that height to get into the soil. But the problem is always having to individually read those sensors.
Right.
And I can see that this IoT with broadband is going to allow companies to link all that together.
Right.
Which will, the algorithms you can write to pull all kinds of data from that.
Well, and you think about the progression of computers, right? From the first computer to these computers, right? It's the same thing will happen, but there's a lot more moving parts in some ways, right? So you're right; those things all have to come together, and if they have to manually read them, that's not going to be efficient. So, yes, the connectivity is going to prevent the ag paperweights.
You had mentioned vertical farms in the cities.
Yeah.
So water in the Central Valley costs $76 an acre foot. Water in San Francisco costs $5,000 or $6,000 per acre foot.
Right. Right.
How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, if I said cities, I didn't mean to exclude other parts of it, because I think actually, while the technology could be developed anywhere, and the actual vertical farm could be built, could really be anywhere. And it should be. And it really, the idea would be build the technology that it's replicable anywhere at a fairly reasonable cost.
If I could re-ask the question is, how would you make water available to vertical farmers close to the central cities? Sorry, how would you make water available to vertical farmers at the same price structure that it's available to remote agriculture?
Well, I don't have probably an easy off-the-cuff answer to that question, but I will say that the fact that vertical farms, if they're designed well, use drastically less water, should create local incentives for the communities to work with those farms to provide that at a rural cost. So those pathways probably aren't there uniformly yet, but as they see the opportunities, I like to hope that they will be.
I didn't see any reference to CIMIS in your talk, and I was wondering if that's an old technology. Are we going to see it change? Are people using it?
People are using, so CIMIS, for those of you who don't know who is it is a network of weather sensors that was CIMIS, C-I-M-I-S, a network of weather towers across the state that was a partnership between the University of California, the Department of Water Resources, and others. And it is a very important resource right now because it produces all kinds of weather and environmental related data that a lot of our tools actually still use, and will use. Now, there are some people who are saying that there's other services that are getting microclimates and micro-weather climates better than CIMIS, but CIMIS still remains an extremely important asset for the development of agriculture technology, and our university faculty and farm advisors use it all the time. So I don't think you can see it going anywhere.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for. So
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll talk, you fix. Thank you very much, Gabe. Really appreciate all of the information you shared, and you're touching on some very important points that one thing I noticed a lot of people taking pictures of slides and whatnot. We're going to try to get the presentations from all the speakers, and they will be up on the website nctechconnection.org after this presentation. So it's not necessary, absolutely. We'll also be making the live stream available after the event, if there's something in particular you want to see again. You ready?
Yep.
Bear with us while we wrestle technology to the ground here. So our next speaker is Willa Leong. She's with the Royce Law Firm. They have been very helpful and very instrumental in helping us put this event together. They do these events all across the country, and they've been very generous in giving us guidance and contributing speakers. So they're bringing the perspective of ag tech from all over the country that they'll be sharing with you today. Willa, in particular, is going to be speaking about the issues that are related to agriculture and emerging technologies. So give her a good Nevada County welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Willa. I'm a partner at the Royce Law. My specialty is corporate finance. I'm also a member of the Band of Angels. The Band of Angels is a group of angel investors in the Bay Area. There are about 150 of us. We're the oldest angel group in the United States. And as of 2016, we've had a special interest group funding only ag tech startups. So I'm going to talk about some of the same stuff but different content as our keynote speaker. A brief history, the demand, technology, funding, and some potential legal issues that comes about. So the eras. Ag tech, some say, started about 20 years ago with the invention of GPS and yield maps. And in the 1940s, the average farmer are feeding about 19 people. And now they're feeding an average about 160 people. And that is allowed by green evolution and information age and other technology. So food security. Food security. Is this better? Or that's for the... a huge problem in food security. So it is said that in the next about 40 years, we have to produce the same amount of food as we produced in the last 8,000 years. So 2050 seems like the number in most research used to predict ag tech development. A lot of people use the year 2050. And by then, we expect to have 9 billion people and feed them, and they're changing diets. And their changing diets come from a growing class of middle class in China, in India, people wanting to eat food with less GMOs, people with the growing, with more money want to eat more meat, fruits, and vegetables as opposed to corn, wheat, and rice. Shortage of farm labor that was touched upon in the last presentation. Just some numbers for perspective. Now in the 1920s, we have 28 million less farmers than we had in the 1920s. And in the United States. In the United States, we have more than 200 million people than in the 1920s. Partly because a lot of farm families have children who didn't end up going into farming. There's more opportunities, and it didn't get passed on to the children who are not interested in farming. There are some farms being sold as we speak in the valley because the farmers are retiring, they're getting old, and there's nobody to take it over. So who do they sell it to? There's some brokers like Berkshire Hathaway, they have some listings, they want to sell it to other farmers, and there's no other farmers that are in the market buying that large scale of farms. But there are people wanting to buy farms, but those people are not farmers. So there's that problem. And partly the shortage is due to the regulatory effects as well, with the rise in minimum wage, immigration, overtime regulations. And that's some charts to give you an idea. So markets. Agriculture, it consists of 8.6% of the global GDP. It is the fastest growing sector since 1999. And about $200 billion of annual investment has gone into ag tech. It's a huge market. So the funding, you can read this. I'm going to give you some perspective. Back in 2012, the investors, VC world, the angels, they they weren't even thinking about ag tech. Nobody were talking about it. It was on nobody's mind in terms of investors. In 2013, some people are thinking about it. Some people are mentioning the word ag tech, and people are like, "Oh, what's that?" And then in 2014, some people started to make investments into ag tech. Very little money. And then in 2015, 2016 is when the investors are coming out to look for ag tech type of deals. As I mentioned, the Band of Angels started a special interest group in ag tech, looking only on ag tech deals. And it was invested pretty heavily. And then in 2017, the investors who invested in 2015 and 16 are kind of like, well, there's not too much going on the companies that they invested in. So the investments actually slowed a little bit in 2017, but it's expected to hit really large numbers in 2018, partly because of certain exits like Blue River and Plenty, who got like $250 million. But the market is still really premature for investors because there hasn't been that many exits, and part of the challenges for investors is due diligence on these deals, because as of last year, there are hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of ag tech companies. I don't know where they came from, because in 2012, there's, hardly any that we've heard of. And now you go online, you search for a list of ag tech companies. I mean, there are thousands of pages of, fine print listed ag tech companies. And they're all looking for money. Most of the VCs and analysts are not farmers. They're not totally sure how to vest these deals. So that's one of their big challenges. These are some of the investment sources. Basically, everybody is trying to invest in ag tech. Corporations are expected to invest a lot more this year. So new innovation. I'm going to try to talk about different content than our keynote speaker. Here are some of the new innovations. And also AI, satellite, robotics, variable rate mechanics, and then precision agriculture. So that's like the word. A good definition of that I've heard is whole farm management with optimizing returns, increase yields and revenue with less resources, and decrease environmental footprint, sustainable farming. Basically, you get more from less resources. And in precision farming, you gather data, you analyze data, and then you manage that information. You use it to make decisions. There are companies with drones that can fly around 20 acres in 5 minutes to collect the data that would otherwise have taken weeks. An example of these data collection and analytics is predictive farming, helping with predictive farming with predictive weathering. A couple of those companies have gotten pretty significant funding in that area. No exits yet, but it's expected that there will be some mergers and acquisitions in that area. So social media, one of the companies that was mentioned in the last presentation is Crop Monster, so that would be food waste. and also companies that are using social media to buy and sell certain crops. There's a company called NGB Markets that we had invested in, which gives restaurants and supermarkets real-time pricing from farms. And also, there are companies that have come about to provide service providers for farmers. So if they needed somebody to fix their machine, or so it's like a Craigslist for ag tech. So mobile only allows farmers to manage their farm completely away from their farm. They can report a pest, or if a cattle is sick, they can deal with it. They don't have to be on their farm to deal with it. Here are some other trending technologies. There are a lot. Some examples. This one is interesting. Granular, it's a mobile app, and it let workers schedule and task, and so no people aren't standing around or waiting for directions, and given the regulatory changes in labor. Heavy Connect is another farm management software. They help with timekeeping, scouting, and tracking. Smart Vision, this is a very interesting company. They sort things. They sort things like fruits very, very fast, like 300 berries per second, like super fast. The video, unfortunately, doesn't work, but you can look it up on YouTube. The way they do it is just, it's incredible. And they are in the market. They are working. This is one of those companies that is in the works. It's not totally done. It's the picking a strawberry and not squishing it, trying to mimic your hands. And they've been in the works for quite a while now. And if you take a look at their video online, it's incredible what they have done and what they're trying to do. But they're not quite there yet.
What's the name of the company?
Yeah, software. Because that blue thing around the cherry is soft and or tomato is soft and flexible. And
Can you go back on, I'm sorry, just on that one slide, thank you. Thank you.
mm-hmm. And here's Blue River. Blue River is like the company that people talk about when it comes to exits and ag tech, because there hasn't been that many. But it's like when investors are looking for the next Google, now they're looking for the next Blue River. And it's to make every plant count. So with all of these technology and data comes with some problems and some legal problems perhaps people should just be aware of. Data ownership, who owns it, all the data that is collected. Does the software company own it? Do you own it? Can they let somebody else see it? Can somebody else see it? Can you sell it? Can they sell it? Most of the time, these software companies would like to keep your data as well, so that they can do their own analytics, not for your farm, but for general information, so that they can sell that information to other companies. And if you don't want them to have your data to sell to other people, just make sure to read the contracts. And speaking of contracts, so they're tricky because some of these online stuff, they give you this thing and they have you agree to it before you can use it. And so people think, just get on with it. I just want to use the software. They just agree to it. And we have this client who is a vendor at the SFO at San Francisco Airport with huge volumes. I mean, in a day, their receipts are about $20,000-$30,000, and they signed one of these shrink wrap contracts just online with their POS system. And in a year, there were these random days where the POS system just didn't batch the receipts; it didn't get sent, and it created a couple $1 million of money that this company never collected. And by the time they found out, this POS system said, "Oh my gosh, so sorry. We're going to go back and enter in everybody's credit card information, and we're going to send it again." But the problem is, a third of the people's credit cards already expired. And then the other people, you get something on your credit card saying that you were SFO in December when you haven't been there since April, and people were reporting these as fraudulent charges, and they got fined. So long story short, they wanted to sue these guys. Now they go to an attorney, and the attorney says, "Well, let me look at their contract." And you look at the contract, and there's a limitation of liability of like $100, plus a bunch of other things in there that they couldn't find an attorney to take their case. So take a look at those contracts. They're normally pretty well drafted by the software companies. So with smart farming comes cyber attacks. So some people may or may not care. The U.S. cares. And then with that, there are security standards, some frameworks, approaches, and plans. And so we inform our clients of some best practices, such as monitoring employee logins, use two-factor authentication, monitor traffic, close unused ports. These are things that farmers aren't really used to doing. Perhaps if there are farmers in here that have purchased software or have these potential problems to maybe outsource, possibly. A reporting notice is highly recommended. These are some current AgTech data standards. And are they workable? Are they workable for farmers? Do they have the time? I mean, it's almost like a lifestyle change to integrate the software and having to, monitor it to make sure that no one's hacking. And another problem, and this is more if you're an AgTech startup, is the lack of formal agreements. We see a lot of problems in that, especially when there's money later on. In the beginning, everybody loves each other. Everybody's super excited to start a business together. There's no problems. And then, when there's funding, money coming in, then there's huge problem. Something that's been popular that we've been seeing lately is called the slicing pie agreement, where you start out, let's say we start out 60-40 for whatever reason, and monthly or annually we'll log in our contributions. And based on our contributions, our stake in the company changes. So that's been pretty popular in the Bay Area. A lot of people are wanting that type of agreement for founders. So drones, huge deal. A lot of drone companies, a lot of complaints about them, regulations are coming about. And here's some FAA rules for commercial drones. And that's my presentation. We're a full-service law firm. Our founder, Roger Royce, got into this ag tech industry over 10 years ago when people were like, what? And we help with, funding. We help with hiring. They need some people. And those are, not legal fees. We don't charge for those things. But we do corporate formation, finance, IP, litigation, if you need, et cetera. And that's it. Thank you. I'd be happy to take questions later. I'd be happy to take questions later after the panel. Yeah.
We do have time now, so
Oh,
see if anything comes up.
sure.
We can move on as well.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's fine.
Just in case that, you know, if there are any attendees that aren't planning on staying the entire day, is there anyone that has a, okay.
Thank you for the presentation, very informative. I bet you don't have it, but if you could help me find out Women, Technology, and Ag, is there a data for that?
I'm sure there's data for that. Yeah.
Can you
I'll
help
take
me
a
find
look.
that out? Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to reply to your comment. Women of Ag, through any Farm Bureau, will be able to guide you through that. It's a huge women supporting agriculture organization, so get a hold of them.
All right, so we'll wrap it up. Thanks,
Thank
Lola.
you.
Thank you all. I know some of you are taking pictures, so when you fill out the evaluation form, if you'll put your email address, we'll email you the presentations as well. Yeah. So, okay, next up, Robert C. Robert is the State Broadband Coordinator and lead for Agricultural Technology and Innovation Strategy at USDA California Rural Development. Using his strategic vision, he integrates policies, resources, and initiatives at all levels of government and creates public-private partnerships. He is focused on improving the economic well-being and quality of life of the rural and food agricultural sector through new agriculture, technology, and broadband infrastructure. Sure. There's also water underneath here if you guys are thirsty up here.
Robert, your credentials enter you. Have the room for you.
I thought I was at my own funeral.
Oops. Oops, that's hers.
Well, you're going to notice that in our presentations, there's a certain common theme, and we overlap. And some of us know each other, like Gabe and John, and we see each other all the time. So you can kind of see that we are thinking in somewhat similar ways. And we also steal each other's PowerPoint slides.
How about share?
Oh, I shouldn't have said that after a lawyer spoke. There's no copyright issue.
Because plagiarism is the nicest form of flattery in this world.
And yes.
Sorry.
Okay. That's right. Well, all I know is on the federal side, we don't have copyrights to any of our work. It's all public domain, and if you can't find it, you can always Freedom of Information Act request it if they don't provide it here. So, well, as you could tell, I work on a lot of different things. So what I wanted to do is, let's see if this works. I'll just use this. Okay. Let's start off and talk about what we all have in common. And basically what we all have in common, along with Homer over there, is we all eat. But what we are seeing is what Homer eats is actually changing. And so it might not be all those same things over there, but also how it's produced, where it's produced, and how it's processed is changing. So and this is kind of what we're all about. I like to put this in a global context. You've heard a little bit about this, but same thing, we have a global population increase. I actually think that is less important than the other two factors. Urbanization, more than 10 years ago, half the world already moved into cities for the first time. And we're on our way to where 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. And that's a huge change. And I'll just give the one example of China, where 25 years ago, China was 15% urban, 85% rural. It's already past 50%, and the official goal of the Chinese government is that 85% of the population will live in cities. That's where they're going. And you can think about what that means in terms of the food context. The other aspect is there is a global middle class that has developed. It is estimated that within 20 years, or maybe even 15 years, half the world's population, by whatever statistical means you want to use, will be considered middle income. And that has huge implications. And the trends, I already got it right there. Rising food consumption, income goes up, people eat more. They change what they eat. There's rising demand for protein, fruits, and vegetables, and I would add processed foods as part of that. I put in rising global tourism economy. It's a reflection of rising income, but that's already a $7 trillion global GDP impact. And global tourism direct travel trade is already over $1 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars. So I put that in there specifically because I was coming up here because I got those numbers last night, is because you do have a tourism trade up here. And so part of your goal is to extract out of that $7 trillion global tourism economy your fair share of that. And then food and health intersect. As you could tell from Homer, there's a health aspect, all that stuff that Homer is consuming, but we see this globally as well. One of the #1 issues in India today is obesity. That's their top disease. And so now you have in India, you have professional diet doctors. Sounds like here, doesn't it? But there's a global phenomenon there, and there is this intersection of food and health, which does show up in what we eat in some of the developments. You've seen this slide that we talked, that we trade back and forth, so I won't talk about it except for just to reemphasize that California is the #1 ag producing and ag exporting state. Unlike other states in the country, it has the most diverse amount of commodities produced. I would say the agriculture is both diverse with the 400 different commodities as to what is produced, but it is also diverse in the size of farms. Although you tend to hear about the large farms, but there are small and medium-sized farms. It is also diverse as to who are farmers. This is the food value chain. And if what we're talking about mostly, we're focusing on farmers, but in the whole food value chain for California, there's a value of somewhere between $150 and $300 billion, depending upon what kind of statistics you're looking at. So that's a multiplier off of the roughly $50 billion of the farm gate for California. Now, what is tying it all together on the technology side is broadband. It's shortened the length of time, the links between each one of those points, and in fact, is making it possible to skip some of those links in the chain to the ultimate consumer. So that's the technological change that has come about. If you look here, I am the broadband person, so those are the layers that I look at in terms of the impact on the rural economy for broadband. The focus here is going to be on the new ag technology. That really wasn't talked about 10 years ago or even 5 years ago as such a big impact, but it's a critical piece now, and so we'll focus on that. What I think has happened is, in the big picture, is the cycle of agricultural development has changed. That in the past, it was primarily up on the far right corner, science, technology, and agriculture, the intermixing of that. Gabe talked about that. That was a traditional role of the land-grant colleges. And the advances came out of there. But now, because of data, and I call it data agrolytics, not analytics, if you get the message on that. And I'm trying to create that as a new word, so it's data agrolytics. But I mean, some of the areas in there come out. It mixes in with clearly automation and robotics, mixes in with the rural broadband access and the IoT for agriculture. And that seems to be the new cycle overall, if you look at it, where we are. So the data agrolytics side, here are some of the big 7 things. Smart irrigation, it's a natural for California. It's really an advancement of what had already started because of the importance of water. Marketplaces is direct marketing, sensors, farm management software, food safety, wearables, and agrobotics as well are some of the big areas that we're looking at, which is tied to data analytics. And again, here we borrowed these slides. And I decided it was easier to read if you just looked at, and I won't read through them, but those are the major categories identified for the smart farm of the future. Yes? A wearable. This thing? We've got, further down, I'll talk about it. There's wearables for cows now. There are.
The sensor, basically.
Yeah. There's, again, if you look at it another way, in terms of the technology and the uses of it, satellite images that are analyzed, in-field monitoring, you already heard a reference to that from the drones. Soil health assessment, which is a big area right now, and is particularly a priority of CDFA, soil health in California. The robots are here, and predictive analytics. The bottom line is everything has changed. I used to use the word grandfather, and then I started thinking about it, and I decided that it was really your great-grandfather or your great-great-grandfather. But in fact, that picture is capturing the technological innovation of the 19th century. That is a steel plow. That innovation made it possible. It made it possible to farm in the Midwest and the Great Plains, because without that steel plow, they couldn't cut through the prairie sodgrass. So agriculture is always a part of, and actually its advancement is a part of technological change. And with technological change, there's always people who are critical of it or concerned about it. Gabe made some reference to the GMO and genetic editing side, and there's controversy there. But that, which seems very benign, when it originally came out in the 1790s, and it was the iron plow, there were people who protested that, because the original development was in the 1790s in New Hampshire, and they said the iron plow would release evil spirits from the soil. That was the complaint. Of course, these are the same people who had the Salem witch trials, so we'll go from there. That's a schematic that's really up there to show you wireless broadband and its impact, and you've heard to talk about the soil moisture sensors embedded in the ground, and it's a visual look of the connection of that. The rain gauge. Yes. Okay, the rain gauge, and then the transmitter that's solar powered. Again, it doesn't work unless you have wireless broadband, but it is transmitting the data wirelessly. I would say that those soil moisture sensors, you could make the argument they're already obsolete, even though they were state-of-the-art. That, the next generation sensor, might be the future. The soil moisture sensor, the point of it is a means of assuming that the moisture needs of the plant are coming out of what you measure in the soil, and that was the state-of-the-art. This thing, which is in development at UC Davis right now, literally measures moisture transpiration off the leaves of the plant. So if I put it in non-scientific terms, it tells you whether the plant itself is thirsty. Also, it tells you, depending upon if the sun is hitting one side of the plant, it can actually tell you that there's more need on that side versus the other side. So that is the next, you could call it incremental increase in efficiency in the use of water. So
closer data mining to what you really want to look at.
Yes, it's the plant, specifically the plant. Again, it doesn't work without wireless broadband picking up that data in the field. We heard it talk about drones, so I won't say anything more about that. All I'll say is that one of the things in terms of the drones do offer, and they're closer to the ground, it does offer an aspect of precision agriculture, which makes it a little, I would say it can contribute to lessening some of the tensions at the urban-rural boundary between farms and the suburbs, because there might be less overspray of that. Obviously, if you come over in a large plain, there's an issue there. So it is a contributor. It is not necessarily the solution. We talked about robots. So there's a picture of one. There's one estimate is it's about a $13 billion market by 2022. We've had this endless discussion about the strawberry picker, and does it work, does it not work? Well, there's another picture of another version of one. I've actually seen 3 versions, 2 developed in Japan of strawberry pickers. They're still working on, who knows, which one will win out. There's a lot of work. Strawberries are probably one of the most complicated technical challenges you can figure out because it's sprawled out in the ground. It ripens at different times. It's delicate. You have all these issues. So that is a huge technological challenge. Again, the automated weeder, it's a different version. That only works because on the precision side, you're precisely dropping the seeds for the plants. So there are a couple of things in conjunction for that to really work. Now, let's talk about bees. We have endless discussion, and I'm sure you've heard about. Everyone always talks about the issue with bees and pollination. I don't know if it's so much of an issue up here, but it's certainly in the San Joaquin Valley, it's a big issue in terms of the decline of bees. So there's a possible, if we're really bad and we don't help out with the bees themselves, does technology offer a solution? In Japan, they've actually developed a drone pollinator, and that's a picture of it. And that is a picture of it landing on those flowers to pollinate. And obviously, in the future, there's GPS or AI to help it maneuver and go on. Now, that's a prototype. I mean, you can look in terms of they probably picked the easiest thing to try to pollinate is that flower because of where the pollen is. But it's a very sophisticated drone because you can't see what you see here is the sort of brush which does the pollen. They had to develop a specific sticky, I guess, brush that would pick up the pollen and also have it be at a different electrostatic, I guess electrically than the way the flowers are, so it would attract the pollen. That by itself is a huge technological challenge. Hopefully we won't get to the point where we are going to be dependent upon that because I think it's going to be kind of expensive. But the fact that that was developed within the last year, this I actually saw, or you can see the size, the mini drone. That was actually developed by national security folks to spy with. But I saw that and I immediately thought of there was possibly then you could go like what they have done in Japan is there's a possible application on the agricultural side, just at least technically speaking. I don't know about practically speaking. That might be a ways away. Again, here's another schematic that shows you the relationship between all the ag technology, and it's connected again. It's wireless broadband that you can look at. And what we're seeing is there's a different perspective on farming now with ag technology. In these areas, production, water, energy, environment, food safety, and health, there's ag technology or technology that is changing things. The ones with the R, water, energy, environment, food safety, and health. One of the big drivers of development is government regulation. Water, all you have to do is use the acronym SIGMA. If you're going to meet the state groundwater regulations on reporting how much water, technology can help you in there. And in fact, that's one place. Food safety, the bottom line on food safety regulations with the Food Safety Modernization Act that's being implemented now is traced back to the farm. And there is technology out there. I'm not sure it's entirely out there completely commercial, but that you can detect unwanted pathogens in less than 2 minutes in a field test. That has huge implications because that means you could stop a harvest before it's finished and avoid any of this cross-contamination further downstream, which is where the biggest cost of these food safety orders actually is. Health is a new thing, and there are 3 things. on the health side of technology. On the human side, and this is being developed specifically for farm workers or people in the field, are essentially it's a glorified Fitbit that would monitor your health conditions so that it would identify if you had before heat stroke. So there's an obvious health benefit to that. From the industry side, if they can eliminate heat stroke and things like that, then you can reduce actually literally the workman's comp costs by a significant amount there. So there's two benefits to that from the farm worker and the health side, from the industry side in terms of lowering their costs there. On the animal side, it's wearables. The animal wearables for cows, there are sensors that the cow can wear that it's kind of like a Fitbit too, monitors the cow's temperature and can record a spike in the temperature well before the cow manifests any physical sign, that traditional way of looking at a cow to see whether it's sick or not. And if you can pull the cow out early, one, there's the obvious benefit of you minimize the possibility of the rest of the herd getting sick. So it's kind of like, if you knew that if somebody in here has the flu, we could drag you out of the room so the rest of us are okay. There's a benefit to that for the rest of us. But also what I'm told is that the treatment that you need for the cow would require much less antibiotics. So this gets into the health side of people because there's a lot of discussion over the large use of animal antibiotics is tied in with the development of resistant bacteria. So if you can reduce the amount of antibiotics you use, I think there's a human health benefit to that. On the soil side, there's different technologies being developed that would improve the quality of soil health. If we step, and we talked about the Dutch earlier, so this is dairy in Holland. They have, I would say, if you want to take a look at the future, I got asked to talk about the future. And since I don't have the time machine, I want to say Wayback Machine, but that's the wrong direction. But there is a way you want to find out where things are gone, and in Holland they have some of the most advanced agriculture in the world through their university there, and one of them is this rotary dairy that they have developed. Another is the fact, and you've heard this already, that they if you want to look at the future of farming, they have miles of greenhouses that they have developed. Same thing, these giant broiler houses, automated for mass production. You can have these slides. So again, you can see that's a picture that shows the greenhouses at night. And one of the point of this is that with this greenhouse production, it is weather resilient, which gets to if we are faced with a situation in the future of very volatile weather. That is one way of trying to mitigate that or dealing with it. Here's an example, and I think Gabe mentioned tomatoes, and this is a very good example of what the Dutch have done. If you look at, I think we are number 3 in production and yield in the world. China is number 1 in production, mainly because it's acreage. So look at the Dutch. I can't. They're way out there in yield. And let's take a look at those numbers and we can compare them. Basically, the bottom line is they produce 5 times as much per square mile and with 1/14 the amount of water per pound. Look at the difference. And somebody asked about water in cities and this distribution. They use 92% less water. So if you did greenhouse production of tomatoes in an urban area, and if you use 92% less water, you can do the math and figure out that you probably could do that with city water rates. It's that efficient. And yes, yes. So that's an example of technology that has been developed out in Holland. Now, whether it would come here or not, it will depend on a lot of other factors. I mean, we're used to having these large fields, but there is something that can change in the future. The other part, the future of farming, Homer might not be eating the same thing in the future. They're growing microalgae as a food source. It's an input or a component for different processed food products. However, the CEO of Pepsi has said, bug-related stuff is big. The hottest thing is eating crickets. And, first of all, there's a guy at University of Arizona who's actually working on developing caterpillars and worms in sort of production. That I've eaten, because I was actually at one of the AgTech conferences, and the company, which is from San Francisco, and nobody would touch the stuff. But I ate it, and it's fine. It's like slightly crunchy potato chips. So it's there, and there's some kind of investment opportunity that's already happened, because the next hot snack food, okay, cricket bars. Or, if you're all the marketers, crickets are the new kale. And personally, I'm sick of kale because it's everywhere. It's become ubiquitous. So maybe that is true. I don't know. It gives you an idea. But what it does give you an idea is that agriculture itself is changing to alternative proteins. Or this, in terms of these folks, are using pea protein as a substitute for shrimp. And that gets at some of the both environmental issues in terms of seafood from the ocean and the fact we've actually fished the ocean out. So they're coming up with an alternative to that. Now, the last part I want to get to is talk about decentralization. This is the sort of wonky kind of things that agriculture, there is a discussion that agriculture is becoming more decentralized. If you think about it, what local food means, it's decentralized, because we have a system in the U.S. that was developed both nationally and globally where food comes from a point and then goes out to everywhere else. And that the system works. It evolved over time, but there is decentralization going on. I'm going to jump to something totally different, but it is appropriate for this region. There is an opportunity, I believe, because of technology developments and because of the internet, if we have it out here in sufficient speed and capacity, then information technology is going to drive a transformation of industrial manufacturing. Up to this point, when you think of industrial manufacturing, it's mass scale manufacturing because it's the economics of it. But because of the development of high performance computing, which you can do complex design in the cloud, there's additive manufacturing. Have anyone heard of additive manufacturing? Additive manufacturing is essentially a descendant of the 3D printer, and it's approaching commercial viability into making with different materials combined together. It's not quite here yet, I think, but it's coming, and it'll probably come faster than you might think. Cloud-based IT solutions, what's one of the biggest headaches that any business has? It's all your administrative stuff. Well, if you can dump it all into the cloud, you don't have to have 5,000 people doing all your bookkeeping and stuff. That reduces administrative costs for small enterprises. And then there's open source innovation tools that are out there in the cloud, which has developed, which is attracting these tinkerers, but they're internet savvy tinkerers. So what that does is it opens the door for decentralized manufacturing of small lot or one-off products, almost a kind of manufacturing that we originally saw during the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci didn't actually paint all his paintings. He had his shop, and there was something, and all these people were working on stuff, and he produced other things besides paintings. But this artisan craft style could now be economic and could revive manufacturing in rural areas. And I think if there's high-speed broadband in a place like here, there is an opportunity that could be quite transformative of things. I know that, and I don't take credit for this, identifying this. One of my counterparts who's with the Pennsylvania Department of Commerce actually talked about this. because what they looked at was in Pennsylvania, believe it or not, the majority of the jobs in rural areas in Pennsylvania were industrial manufacturing jobs. 31% of the jobs are industrial manufacturing, more manufacturing jobs than actual number of farmers in Pennsylvania. And the decline of industrial manufacturing over the last 40 years was a major cause of the economic problems in rural Pennsylvania. Now, we haven't gone through the same thing here in the West. This industrial manufacturing tradition is a Northeast, Midwest phenomenon, but you have the opportunity to open the door for a different kind of manufacturing. And I would say, we'll tie this back to ag technology, that you actually could then have the smaller manufacturing of unique parts for ag tech out here. So the clock is ticking. So anyway, this is a schematic that ties together all the broadband pieces, and the key pieces: data analytics, which drives everything you've heard about ag technology, tying all the pieces together. I would say the newest thing is this cloud-driven design and production for small-scale local manufacturing. Again, all of this depends upon broadband to work. And there we go. Ag tech for the future on the broadband highway to the farm, with broadband, wireless broadband everywhere. So there we are.
All right, thank you so much. So we do have some time for questions. Anybody? Okay.
One of the problems that I've run into is there's no point of control on pushing broadband in this area. The county government doesn't take an interest. There doesn't seem to be any state interest in actually making sure that we get the best use of the broadband facilities that we have now. How do you find another?
For California, the state is divided up into regional broadband consortiums, which come out of the California Public Utilities Commission, and there is one in this area. And I think, well, my general advice is that the broadband consortiums were created to represent the local or regional area, and that be the driving point or the coalescing point of all the different interests. The challenge you have with the state, and then I have on the federal side, is this area is so large that we can't actually get to each spot. So it's a logistical challenge in one sense, but also I think that it's very clear that each region has its own set of needs. It's not a cookie cutter approach, because you've got a different type of geography here that's quite different. It represents a different challenge and has different solutions for it. And the other part is, what I've seen is that you have to find the local coalescing point, and you have to drive it. We can help you. We can give you advice. I can talk about all that stuff, like right there, where you might be able to see some opportunities that might not have been obvious before. But for local broadband to be a success, it's got to be locally driven, and you have to be the buy-in. You have to drive it. And then it's our job to try to help you figure out how to do it. But I will say, and even though, my career has been in both federal and state government, I'm not going to tell you that federal and state government has the answer or is the only place to go for the resources. There are examples of cities or across the country that have decided on their own they're not going to wait, and they built their own broadband community system, and they went and did it. And they never filled out an application for a federal grant or loan. And I'm not supposed to be a shill for our federal programs. I'm not. I'm just going to tell you that there are resources there to tap, but on the other hand, look to yourself. You've got more resources than you might think.
That's the drive at rural broadband. That's what I'm seeing, is a lot of local communities, rural communities are just getting tired of the government, and they're putting up their own rural broadbands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, new types of repeaters to get over mountains. You know, there's all this technology now available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Robert. It was very informative. Our next speaker, we have plenty of time. You've got some extra time if you need it, is John Sellup. He's the founder of AgTech Innovation Partners and a board director, for the Sacramento Angels. John Sellup is a co-founder and president of the AgTech Innovation Alliance, the 501c3 nonprofit supporting AgStart, which many of you have seen his table out front there, an ag and food technology incubator providing mentorship and connections to early stage ag tech innovators and entrepreneurs in the Sacramento, Yolo, Placer, Nevada County region. John, welcome.
Well, I think what you'll find from the slides that you're going to see, there's a lot of collaboration at the federal, the state, University of California, and at the local, regional level with AgStart. Actually, Robert, Gabe, and I collaborate and meet each other at a lot of different conferences around the region. So you'll notice that there is commonality in some of the themes that we talk about. What I'm going to talk about this afternoon is resources for ag and food tech entrepreneurs. And I want to distinguish tech entrepreneurs, those who are developing technology that can be used in the food system, from raw production, a farmer or a producer raising chickens or growing apples. That's the agricultural production chain, but that production chain relies on technology in a variety of ways all throughout the production, cultivation, harvesting, and also post-harvest in terms of processing those foods. So AgStart is an incubator that focuses on the technology side, the technology entrepreneurs. And just to give me a sense for in the audience, raise your hand if you are or consider yourself a technology entrepreneur in the food and ag space. Excellent. And we also have individuals who are growers, producers. And then there's a third element in the ag food value chain. There are landowners, people who own agricultural land, and they sometimes rent it out to others to cultivate it on their behalf. There are many different spaces in that ecosystem. But again, I want to focus on AgStart. AgStart actually grew out of a program under an organization that began in 2012 under the Sacramento Area Regional Technology Alliance, which was a 9-county regional alliance of technologies focused on medical technology, clean energy technology, ag technology, and information technology. SARTA, the Sacramento Regional Technology Alliance, kind of passed away a couple of years ago, and each of those vertical programs has now spun off into its own entity. I was a volunteer back in 2012 and on the Mentor Advisory Council for SARTA's AgStart, and we were standing around the table one day when we learned that SARTA was no longer going to be continuing, and we looked around at each other and said, this is too important for the region and for the state to have this stop. So we founded our own 501c3. We're now operating, we're funded through both corporate contributions and a number of both state and now federal grants, and we support food and ag technology entrepreneurs. Who we are, our mission is to accelerate ag technology innovation. We've had a 5-year history. We've supported about 60-plus startup companies in specific programs that we've run. We've actually sponsored some of those ag technology companies to showcase themselves in ag tech showcases as far away as St. Louis, Missouri, and here in Sacramento and elsewhere around the region. We provide a variety of services. In 2012, we have an incubator here in the region. It's actually located in Woodland, which is not necessarily adjacent here to Nevada City, but it's within the 9-county region. And I'll talk about its positioning later in the discussion. We hold monthly office hours, one-on-one, pro bono, free consulting mentorship to startup companies. And we've consulted with companies in our incubator from as far away as Chile. That was just earlier this week. We had our office hours. So we're seeing a lot of interest in ag technology. And uniquely, there's interest in startup companies in ag technology from other parts of the planet who want to come and get established in California, because California is an innovation hub and a place where they can see their technologies come to market. What AgStart does, just this is a quick advertisement, then I'll get into the meat of the discussion. We provide one-on-one mentorship. We provide an incubator with co-working facilities in downtown Woodland, right in the heart of downtown. Within 2 blocks of our incubator, there's about a dozen different restaurants, a coffee shop, and everything you might need. We provide a set of business fundamentals workshops for education. These are the business fundamentals of how to create a startup, and we try to tailor that to the unique opportunities and insights and challenges of ag technology startups. And then we provide connectivity. We can provide connections for startup companies if they want to get university relationships, if they want to connect to growers or producers in our local region. We have a mentor advisory council of about 20 different professionals who work in various aspects of the ag and food industry, as well as the ag technology industry. We also have accounting and lawyer contacts if a startup company needs advice in those areas. And those connections are really essential to allowing the startup companies to be successful. Our mission is to provide them the connections to the resources and the connections they need to be successful. And we do that in the local Sacramento Valley region. More recently, we've been looking at, what's the future of agriculture look like? What can we do to really promote and develop agriculture and raise it to the next level within our local region? And then what can we do statewide? To give you a sense for what's the baseline in the local region, the ag and food value just in our local Sacramento region, this is the 9-county SARTA kind of legacy region, including Nevada County, there's about $4.3 billion of agriculture and food value. Some of that is in raw ag production. So when it leaves the farm gate on the back of a truck or a trailer, that's the ag production. But then it goes to a local processor. For example, a farmer might be growing processed tomatoes, and they might ship it to Pacific Coast Producers or Morningstar in Woodland, where it gets turned into canned salsas, sauces, ketchup, other kinds of things. Oftentimes, the value of the ag production can be multiplied by a factor of 3 as a finished manufactured or processed product, whether it's, again, a jar of ketchup or a can of tomato sauce or whatever. The same is happening not just in tomatoes, but in other areas. Blue Diamond Almonds is a cooperative. They spend about $3 billion on the almond input that they bring in from their cooperative farmers who are members of the cooperative. They turn that into about $9 billion worth of agricultural output. That's packaged roasted almonds with specific flavorings. They're looking at wasabi almonds for export to Japan. They're really pioneering the global market for almonds. Just to give you a quick story, I had a set of representatives from the Netherlands come into our incubator and talk to us about what's going on in California agriculture. And we're talking about the major crop types in California, and almonds is the number 1 plant crop. Dairy and milk is the number 1 actual commodity, but number 2 right behind that is almonds. And they were thinking, that's interesting, almonds. And then their eyes opened wide, and they said, marzipan. Think of all the French pastries and everything else, the almond croissants. That sugar almond butter paste comes from almonds grown in California, because they don't grow almonds anywhere in Europe, Africa, Asia. Almonds are primarily grown here in California, and there is some small almond production in Australia. But suddenly they realized how critical California agriculture was to their quality of life there back in the Netherlands, because we export a lot of these major crops. So I wanted to make the point that agriculture and ag tech is not just about the raw production. Ag tech can also be used and is very appropriate. A lot of these major processing plants to transform agricultural harvests into packaged food products. There's a tremendous amount of technology, tremendous amount of water, energy, labor that is both expended and can be saved through the applications of technology. In terms of ag employment here in the region, again, Yolo County and Sacramento County are very, very large in terms of both processing and raw production, but Nevada County is represented there as well. And there's employment in the region in ag technology. And a critical point is we have industry clusters that are top in the world, right here within our 9-county region. There is a cluster of vegetable seed breeding in Woodland, Davis, and West Sacramento. It's probably the highest concentration of vegetable seed breeders anywhere in the U.S., certainly, and perhaps even in the world. We also have a cluster in the Davis, West Sacramento area in terms of biologics, so microbial biologics with companies like Marone Bio. Novozymes is doing work there. Smaller startups that aren't on the top 10, but there's about a half dozen microbial biologics companies that are doing research in and around Davis and West Sacramento. And we have major processors and producers in the region, Blue Diamond Almonds. We have Morningstar and Pacific Coast producers in processed tomatoes. We have within the region a very large number of rice mills because this is also the center of California rice production. And so we have tremendous assets here in our region, and that's why AgStart was so important to keep going, because we have this opportunity to link startup companies who are taking research or ideas or innovations and make that impactful for our region. I'm repeating slides or concepts you heard from both Gabe and Robert, but California is the leader. It's a U.S. leader and it's a world leader in terms of agricultural productivity. And we produce crops here in California that aren't produced anywhere else in the U.S. I mean, there are things like dairy and milk and cream, cattle and calves and hay, but the other items that are top 10 in terms of California agricultural production are produced nowhere else in the United States. But as a leader, our leadership is threatened by critical issues. Labor, with all the issues that are going on, water, land, energy, and economics. Again, these themes were talked about by both Gabe and Robert. Regulatory compliance, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, a lot of the Food Safety Modernization Act reporting requirements, surface water needs to be reported now. Those compliance issues could raise costs for growers. The only way to keep that down is through technology and by automating that reporting so it's not something that's a major hurdle. And then there's changing consumer preferences. We'll get into some of the specific details. These are just, I keep a folder of newspaper clippings, and I pulled a couple of them out. In terms of labor, labor is driving a lot of the specialty crop production to Mexico because there just is not sufficient labor. Here in our region, our 9-county region, the amount of acreage devoted to stone fruit, nectarines, apricots, peaches, has dropped by 43% in the last 15 years. Not because people aren't eating that fruit, but the labor to pick that and the certainty that, the apricot harvest there's a 2-week window out of the 52 weeks of the year. You have to have that labor there when the crop is ready to pick, and given the vagaries of weather and everything else, you really can't predict exactly when it's going to be ready to pick. And if you can't get the labor to pick your crop in that 2-week window, it becomes too soft to pick, it'll never make it to market, and that farmer has lost his entire production. That kind of uncertainty due to the unavailability of labor has driven farmers to remove their stone fruit plantations, put in mostly nut crops. They're putting in permanent crops. It's either walnuts, almonds. In the southern part of the valley, it's pistachios, because those are fully mechanized crops. You are no longer at the risk of not being able to recruit the labor you need. So fully mechanized crop production has almost doubled. If you look at the Central Valley in terms of almonds, walnuts, pistachios, in some cases more than doubled in the last 15 years in terms of raw acreage, where stone fruit, hand-picked fruits, have dropped by half. So labor is having a huge issue, huge impact on agriculture. California agriculture is not static. It's very dynamic, and even year to year, we see differences in terms of plantings. So the future is going to be robots. The other issue we talked about was water, and we've seen, here are a couple of just headlines, but, even this year, after last year's kind of wet year, the snowpack in the Sierras right now is at a very, very low ebb, and we're going to have, I think, recurring waves of drought come through. And so technologies that can make the most of every drop of water that we have will help farmers to keep some of their land in production. The alternative is you simply don't plant. Our rice production in the last 3 or 4 years has gone, up and down considerably because rice farmers are not going to plant rice on some of their acreage if they aren't assured they're going to have enough water to take it through to maturity and completion. It makes no sense to go halfway through the year and then realize they don't have enough water to bring that crop to harvest and get any revenue from it. So they make their planting decisions based on what they project the water use to be, and we need good available sources. Consumer preferences are shifting. We're seeing a lot of interest now in reducing the amount of antibiotics in our food. That's forcing changes in grower practices. That's creating a lot of demand for new approaches to keep animals healthy. Food makers are freshening up their labels. 5 or 10 years ago, you'd look at a list of ingredients on the side of a cereal box or something else, and it was about 4 or 5 things you recognized and about 27 things you didn't recognize. And that is dramatically changing, again, based on consumer preferences. This has nothing to do with organics. It's just that consumers want to see ingredients they recognize. They want real food. They want things that have wheat and sugar and eggs, as opposed to a host of chemical names. And so that's forcing the major food producers to be looking for what kind of ingredients can they get that have the characteristics that they want. It's changing, frankly, all of the consumer packaged goods, not just food, but soaps and other kinds of things. Consumers want naturally based soaps and air fresheners and those kinds of things that have plant-based or real inputs, as opposed to something that came out of a petroleum plant. So those changes are rippling through, and that's creating this opportunity. That's why we have a microbial pesticide industry in the Davis, West Sacramento area. There is a cluster right here within our region that is primarily based on, or was originally based on, the need to get away from petroleum-based synthetic chemicals for pesticides, herbicides, crop growth chemicals, and hormones and things. And now we have microbial-based solutions that are, I think we're discovering every day just how important the soil microbial health is and the plant microbial health is to the productivity of those plants. If we're going to use and rely on technology to keep California a leader, we need an innovation ecosystem that can allow those new innovations to come to market. And a simple model of an innovation ecosystem, you've got to have talent and ideas. Every entrepreneur, you've got a talented business person, sometimes a technology or science-based talent. They've got some ideas. It may be new science or maybe applications of new science to new application, for example, in ag. It takes a lot of collaborators, no matter where you are in the supply chain. Entrepreneurs are buying things from some suppliers. They're using Amazon Web Services in the cloud. They're using something from suppliers. And they're reaching their consumers through channels, through partners, or they're using influencers or advisors to get to a grower or a processor. Government policy, there's a lot of government policy impacting both the investment that those entrepreneurs might raise. They might be getting grants from government entities to help with their research. And they need resources. They need access to capital. They need access to infrastructure and facilities. Where AgStart is having an impact, we're trying to create that community where the talent, the resources, the collaborators can come together and meet each other and talk about the problems that they're facing and how they can solve them. We're providing infrastructure and facilities through our incubator, and we're providing that mentorship, that one-on-one guidance as a collaborator to really help advise those entrepreneurs as to how they can help. But we're doing that on more of a local, Sacramento regional basis. Gabe and I got together earlier last year, and we talked about what can we do on a California statewide basis? What can we do to create a world-class innovation ecosystem for the state of California? Because there were clusters here in the Sacramento region. There's a cluster in Salinas with the Western Growers Innovation Center. The Fresno State Wet Center, the Water Energy Technology Center at Fresno State, was doing some things locally with entrepreneurs, but each of us was operating in a silo. And if I was talking to an entrepreneur that had something, maybe they had an idea to automate strawberry harvesting. Strawberries are harvested in the Salinas-Watsonville area. And so our network and our advisors who are here in the Sacramento region don't have strong networks down there. And if someone in Fresno wanted to talk about, let's say, rice production, there isn't rice production in Fresno. It's up here. And through our network, we can get to rice processors and rice millers in our region. But again, we have these kind of little isolated silos. And so what Gabe and I proposed last year to the U.S. Economic Development Administration is let's create a statewide community, a network or those linkages between incubation centers and innovation hubs across the state so that we can allow any entrepreneur anywhere in the state to get access to the resources they need to be successful. And the wonderful thing is the UC A&R has a tremendous set of resources. They've got county-level crop advisors. They have 9 different research and extension centers, which frankly are not as heavily utilized as they could be if entrepreneurs knew that they were there and how to access them. A lot of entrepreneurs who are working in things in the field need to have field trials. They need to go to a grower and say, look, we've tried this in 5 different locations and it produces, increases yield by 10%. They need that proof before a grower is going to be willing to commit to any kind of major trial in their zone. So by assembling what we call the vine, the mission or the vision is to connect those clusters of innovation resources around the state, the rec centers that UC-A&R has in place, the innovation hubs in Salinas and Fresno, and frankly in Chico or in Irvine or in Riverside. There are innovation hubs and innovation centers in UC Merced. Look around the state. And the resources that we're talking about are things like mentorship and connection, co-working space like we have in Woodland, maker spaces where there's actual equipment or tools where entrepreneurs can tinker with things and get access to the additive manufacturing, the 3D printing resources they need. A lot of the science-based approaches in terms of cultivation and helping move forward need wet lab facilities where you can have researchers in sterile facilities and they're working with either growing microbes or taking apart different types of pea proteins and things to create these new artificial foods. That takes a certain set of facilities which you just don't find in most places, most entities. And in some cases, where we're doing trials, we need greenhouses. There's a couple of startups that I'm familiar with in our region, working out of Davis and elsewhere, where they're growing new specialty ingredients, a wild berry from Central America that has interesting interactions on the human tongue that turn sour flavors like lemon juice into something that tastes to you and I like it was sweet. But these berries are, from a specialty bush that's grown in Central America. They needed a greater supply here for their testing, and so they're growing that in greenhouses just locally. And then for larger scale production, growing fields, UC Davis and UC-A&R at their research and extension centers have growing fields where entrepreneurs can try things and experiment with, is this crop treatment, does it increase yield by 10% or 20%? Does it increase the drought tolerance to help us deal with the water scarcity issues we're having here in California? And so these are the kinds of resources that entrepreneurs need. And what we found by doing an inventory around the state of all these centers, again, this is a repeat of a slide that Gabe showed, but here are those resources scattered across the different centers that we had identified. And what we found is there's a few places in the state where there's wet labs, but there's many places in the state, large swaths of the state, where there are not wet lab facilities available to entrepreneurs. Growing fields and greenhouse space available to entrepreneurs is also something that's scarce. And as other industries around the agricultural field are sucking up greenhouse space for other cultivation purposes, again, less and less is available on a small basis as needed to entrepreneurs. So again, our vision, this is still potential collaborators. We're in the process right now. I think my next slide talks about where we are. We're in the process of assembling the communication networks and linkages to build that community. We've talked to most of the people that we listed on the previous slide, but we still don't have what are the mechanisms where they feel that they're collaborating and jointly governing this community that we're building. We're deploying it in collaboration with UC-A&R. And for entrepreneurs, the message today is connect with your local incubator or resource and encourage them to join the Vine Network. But the Vine Network is not just something we're doing with UC-A&R. We need help as well. So for industry participants, if you are a consultant, a grower, a crop advisor, we'd love to have you join as a mentor. Either join AgStart or join some other local incubator so that your knowledge and expertise can be available to entrepreneurs. If you're a grower or producer in the ag production space, or you're a processor who might be looking for technology to help improve your operations, connect with an incubator, collaborate with local entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs would love to be able to spend time just understanding what are the problems that keep you awake day or night, so they can understand whether the technologies or the insights they have on the technology side could be an improvement. And if you're a corporate entity, we're a nonprofit. Many of the incubators in this network are nonprofits. We would love to have corporate sponsorship. Frankly, I'd love to have a Rabobank name above AgStart on the top of our incubator, and a little bit more funding so we can do a little bit more to support local entrepreneurs. So I want to thank you. I want to invite all of you to join the Vine, this community that we're building, and wait to hear more in the next few months.